think you were definitely in your, maybe in your 20s at that point in time, if I'm not wrong.
Correct.
And people who are listening to us might be in that, in that same phase, and probably thinking of going somewhere, or if I should be doing this. So something that can help them maybe understand what it really means to be, on your own and learning things.
I definitely learnt that I was really good at starting new things, but I wasn't able to articulate that probably until 20 years later. It was quite natural for me to look for that next new thing. Like, as I said, if I didn't feel like it was serving me or I wasn't enjoying it, I would have no qualms in moving on. I think a lot of people hold on to being in one place because they think it'll either get better or they're a little bit scared about that unknown. So to be curious means to be vulnerable, which means to be brave, in my opinion. So to be brave and to take that next best step for yourself, knowing that sometimes the grass isn't greener, but sometimes it is. So you've just kind of got to weigh that up about your own risk assessment and what that means for you, to make that next step.
That's very interesting, because I think the second point that I wanted to highlight is something that you've just reinforced is for people who are in their 20s, I think a lot of us, we are always in the dilemma of, I don't know what to do. I'm really not sure what I'm here for. And I think your experience, and that, thank you for sharing it, because it helps us understand that take your time to explore yourself, to explore who you are. And that's how I see your journey, being there on a working holiday visa, doing things. And as you highlighted that, I was very sure of where I do not want to be or what I don't want to do. And even kind of able to identify that is a really big thing. So thank you so much, Rachel, for taking us through that and highlighting those important bits for our listeners today. And if they can kind of understand that it's okay, like if you are trying and every day you're learning something new about yourself, it's actually an achievement. That's actually growth and improvement. So from there, Rachel, not having a background where your relatives or your parents were into family business, but you always had that thing in your heart, want to be independent and curious. You came to a new country. How did that transition from a traditional setup in a professional sense to the business setup? How did that happen? We would love to know about what was the ups and downs, or how did it all start for you?
Well, certainly the theme of knowing where I didn't want to be is pretty strong in those next steps. As I traveled, I had realized that I was really interested in the spaces that we spend our days in. So whether or not that's where you live, where you shop, where you work, the parks that you might walk through, all of those built spaces had a really big impact on how I felt, whether it be natural light or new buildings or old buildings. And being exposed to different architecture and different cultures as you're traveling around the world, you become quite in tune with that. So that's what led me. I was actually inquiring about doing a degree in interior architecture from
Wow.
London, I think. I made those first inquiries, but from London, I came back to Australia, spent some time here, saved up some more money. I did come home with 72 cents in my bank account. So I did have to find some work. And then I traveled again to Canada. And that is when I really realized that I had to go on to some type of tertiary education to provide myself with more options. I'd kind of,
Right.
walked the pathway of administrative work and knew that that wasn't necessarily going to get me any further professionally if I didn't take on tertiary education. So what was supposed to be a 12-month working holiday in Canada turned into 6 months because on my way back to Australia for my sister's wedding, I was supposedly supposed to catch a plane from New York on September 11, 2001. And we all
Oh,
know what happens on September 11. So that got delayed somewhat. And with all of that adventure, I did decide to stay in Australia. But that certainly promoted my timings to go to university to come forward. So I went through the process of applying for interior architecture, and then that sent me on to that next pathway of 3-4 years of study. So there was always that level of understanding where I didn't want to be, which then pushed me to that next step of, well, what will create more opportunities for me? And I do believe that you have to be responsible for creating your own opportunities as much as taking those opportunities that they present themselves to you to create that next pathway.